Okay, well, you're not interested in what I'm going to talk about, so fine. Okay, back with another Pixar review. This is actually being recorded the Thursday before Thanksgiving, so about a week before Thanksgiving. It will hopefully go up either, give or take what's going on with the One Piece chapter, either the Thursday or Friday of Thanksgiving or Black Friday, or the Sunday after, give or take, but over that Thanksgiving time frame. I guess it was the closest thing that I could figure out that was somewhat applicable to like the story of the movie. I mean, I guess Valentine's Day also would have been appropriate, but I'm like, I really don't want to wait until February to review this movie, and I've seen it already, and I've seen it on Disney Plus now, and it's been on Disney Plus for a while, and I just haven't gotten around to doing this specific Pixar review, but now I have, or now I am. So this is going to be my review of Pixar's Elemental, which came out this year in 2023. My dad and I went and saw this with my younger niece. I think it was like the week before we were going to go on vacation to Kansas City for a long weekend. And the three of us very much enjoyed the movie. I actually have my Universe shirt because, you know, I'm talking about, you know, the basic building blocks of everything, the elements. Not quite the periodic table of elements, but, you know, breaking it down to, you know, fire, water, earth, and air. So, you know, I'm sure there's a reference in there to the band, but I'm not going to worry about finding it. This is the 27th Pixar feature. So, you know, Pixar's been doing pretty dang good. It was one of the ones that was released during the Disney 100 year celebration. This year was the 100th anniversary of the founding of Disney Studios. So, you know, a couple of weeks ago or last month or so, they had a special short that they released on Disney Plus. It was called Once Upon a Studio That I Adored. And I will eventually be getting around to doing a review of that. That might be something that happens around Christmas or New Year's, depending on stuff. But we'll see how that aligns with work and this and family stuff and everything else. So, into the actual movie review. So the movie itself starts off with a couple from Fireland finding their way to Element City. The couple ends up getting renamed as Bernie and Cinder Lumen. Those are not their given names before they arrive. They kind of get renamed at the immigration office, which is a lot of this movie is very much about the immigrant experience in regards to, you know, the new groups coming in and, you know, the established groups and comparisons and everything like that, and how sometimes, you know, a city is not necessarily designed for those that are arriving that are the newest members of the city, and that sometimes, you know, things have to be changed or updated to make things safe for the new ones that are coming in or make it more welcoming and stuff like that. And that is part of what this movie is about. This is also one of the very few Pixar movies that is a love story. WALL-E was kind of the first. We kind of had parts of that with Toy Story 4 with Woody and Bo. But now we're very much having it here be center place in this movie, which I adored. I know a lot of people weren't necessarily exceedingly impressed with this movie. It wasn't this big, epic space adventure or something along those lines. It, you know, it wasn't this huge adventure type of a thing, but it is an adventure in the fact that it is about two people finding themselves and finding what makes them happy, and finding out that each other is what makes them happy and stuff like that. And that, you know, that's a basic thing here, but still. So we're introduced to Bernie and Cinder, and they arrive at Elemental City. We see that there are the four basic elements seem to be represented quite well in the city. We have water being the first element that arrived, and then earth arrived, and then air arrived, and now people from Fireland are arriving. So this is assumed to be that there are like waterland, earthland, airland, or clouds, I guess, and then Fireland is where Bernie and Cinder are from. And Cinder is pregnant, very heavily pregnant when they are arriving. And there is this blue flame that Bernie keeps with him that is supposed to be this symbol of their home of Fireland, which this flame is very important throughout the course of the movie. So that's going to be part of the story as well. We see that once they arrive in Elemental City, initially they seem very intrigued about everything that's going on around them, with seeing, the water and earth and air elementals being able to live quite peacefully together. And how different parts of the city are designed to for mobility and transportation and for keeping everybody comfortable and everything like that. Unfortunately, in the process, there ends up being this moment where Cinder gets some water splashed on her, which, of course, she's fire, so that causes a bit of problems, and that makes Bernie start to be not very happy with water. Admittedly, I don't think we saw the water person that splashed her apologize for it. If that had happened, if they'd apologized, stuff may not be quite as bad as it appears to be later on in the movie. But what ends up happening is, of course, Cinder and Bernie end up having to go around to try to find a place where they can live. They get turned down at any place that is for rent, which is very much similar to what happens a lot of times with immigrants coming into any new place. There are lots of people who refuse to rent to immigrants depending on what they look like, and in this case they keep coming up with reasons of like, oh, we have dry leaves, we can't have fire here, or oh, we're water, we don't need fire here, we might boil away, different things like that. And they're all, Bernie and Cinder are being discriminated against. For reference, this movie, the director of this movie, Peter So, who has done several other Pixar movies as well, and animated shorts, his parents are immigrants. And part of this movie was him talking about the experiences that his parents experienced as immigrants and that he experienced as a child of immigrants. And even in regards to, there's the love story in this movie between Ember and Wade, that we see throughout this movie that is similar to love stories that have happened for a lot of people that worked at Pixar, that, were them and their parents were immigrants and they ended up marrying someone who was not from the same culture that they were. So there was this, distance there, that there was this, conflict that arose there. My family, in regards to the immigrant status, we've been here for several generations. I believe it was my great-grandfather on my mom's side, I think, that came through Ellis Island. So his name is written in one of those giant books. And then he brought his wife over, and I think their oldest children, and then subsequently all the rest of my grandmother and her siblings were all born here. But I don't know exactly about my grandfather's side of the family, and I don't know exactly about my dad's side of the family. But I know that we've been here for several generations. But I am also, I work with people who are, immigrants, and I've worked with people in the past who were immigrants that, like, they themselves were the immigrants or they are children of immigrants. And there is this, there's this, you're coming into a different culture, and that's what we're seeing here with Cinder and Bernie. And they're facing a lot of discrimination, and eventually they end up finding this abandoned building, and Bernie decides that he is going to end up turning it into a store. And during this whole time frame, Cinder gives birth to Ember, who is their little daughter, and she is like literally like the spark within their family, the ember of their family. She is the center of their lives. But during this whole time frame, Bernie is rebuilding this building into a place that they can sell lots of merchandise from Fireland and stuff that they make and things like that, and have a place that can be like cultural stuff for their people. And over the next several years, the community of Firetown starts to build up around the store, inhabiting these abandoned buildings and taking over and everything like that, and building up their own shops and stores and restaurants and things like that. So there's this community that builds up there. And we watch through this sequence as Cinder is growing up with Bernie and Ember and all of those types of things. We see how Bernie just adores Ember, and how Ember adores Bernie and just wants to do everything to make him happy and everything. And, so we see how all of that happens. We watch as Ember grows up. We watch her dealing with different customers and her father and everything like that. We watch as, the community builds. And eventually it is to the point where Bernie tells her that when she is ready, he will have her take over as the owner and the person managing of the Fireplace, which is the name of the store. And he intends to, train her and everything like that, help her get to the point where she is able to take over for him. She wants to keep her father and their legacy alive and everything like that. So, and one of the things in the store is they have the spot where they have the blue flame on display, because it's supposed to be that this flame has been passed down through their family to a degree, or a part of this flame has been passed on through their family. For many, many generations. Bernie and Cinder brought it with them when they came over from Fireland, and now it keeps burning in their shop, as a way of showing off their cultural heritage and everything. So we see all of that, and we get this moment where, once we kind of, build up to kind of present day, Cinder is dealing with a lot of customers who are just causing her a lot of problems. And Cinder is very much shown that she has a hard time making connections with the customers, which I've worked in retail. Sometimes it is very hard to make connections with customers. Sometimes you wish to strangle them. Sometimes you have ones you wish would shop there more often because you like talking to them. And then there's all the ones in between that are just like, well, you're fine, but I can deal with you. And then you have ones that you just want to shove out of the store because all they do is cause problems, and they don't spend enough money to warrant the problems they are causing. And so, yeah, for someone who has dealt with retail, I am well aware of how that works. Oh yeah, so I know where you're coming from there, Ember. And so we have these moments, and what ends up happening is that Cinder tends to overheat, as in, like, we see her fire get more and more purple and brilliant and stuff, and glowing brighter and everything like that. And she tends to, like, explode and annoy, that kind of is somewhat not the best for the customers, because sometimes it can destroy the merchandise and different things like that. But we see these different moments throughout the movie where when she was younger, and I love how they built this up in the movie, and I didn't notice this the first time until after I, watched it the first time, and then I realized in retrospect that's what they were doing there. So there's this moment when Ember is probably, pre-teen, teenage-ish. I don't think we ever get her exact age in the movie, but I'm assuming that by the present time frame she's in her early to mid-20s, depending on stuff, give or take. But one of the things that we see her do when she's a kid, or when she's younger, is she has they have like these sugar pops that they sell to their customers, and she has the sugar pop, and it starts off as just like an orb, and she warms it up with her fire, and then she morphs it into the shape of the face of the person who's buying it, to give it a little bit more of character. And she gives that to the person, to the customer. So we have that seeded earlier, and then when she has her kind of little temper tantrum against, or her little explosion against the customer, she breaks a bunch of the glass on the display case. So she walks around and she picks up all the glass, melts it all back together, stretches it out, blows it, and fixes it and puts it back into place. Very easily, like it's something she's done 1,000 times, which, given how much it's indicated that she tends to have these issues with customers, she probably has done it quite a few times. So she's very good when it comes to dealing with that type of a material. And eventually what ends up happening is, of course, her and her father kind of have these back and forth jibes at each other and stuff like that, but it's, it's all in good fun, and, She wants to, she does want to prove herself that she is capable of taking over. And of course, her father wants her to be able to prove that. But he's just like, when you are ready, when you can make connections with customers and everything, then you will be ready to take over the store. And then we have this sequence where Ember has to go and do her deliveries all over the city or all over Firetown, because she hasn't really left Firetown for the majority of her life, because fire isn't necessarily very welcome in a lot of the other parts of the city, because a lot of the transportation and things like that are done via water. And that's not necessarily the safest thing for fire to be traveling on. Also, she's worried about setting the earth elementals on fire, because she can burn away their leaves and everything like that, or accidentally boiling the water, or I don't know what kind of damage she could do to clouds, but I'm sure there'd be some type of a damage there that could technically be done if not careful. And also the water could, put Cinder out, which is not good. So while she's getting everything ready, she goes, and her mother is doing these. Her mother is kind of like this love expert type of a thing. She does these different readings for couples, the love match readings for couples, to try to help show if the couple are a good match. So it's this tradition thing from Fireland and stuff like that, and that's what she's doing when Ember shows up. And her mother kind of like she's talking to a couple who are having their reading done, and she's like, and then when it comes to this one, like pointing at her daughter, she's like, and then when it comes to this one, I have never smelt a whiff of love on her at all. So this is implying that when a fire elemental starts to fall in love or is in love, that the smell from their fire seems to shift a little bit, and Cinder is able to detect this. It probably was something that like her mother taught her, and that her grandmother taught her mother, and passed on down the line. And so she's kind of it's the whole thing of like well, I want my child to get married, but they don't seem to have any interest in getting married or dating or anything like that. So we have all that joke there, that whole thing there when it comes to like your job is to get married and give me grandchildren, because that's what your job is. Thankfully my mother does not have that opinion when it comes to me. I give her grandpuppies is what she gets from me, doesn't she, Brenda? So a good girl. And so Cinder ends up doing all of these deliveries, and there's this little earth kid called Claude that has like this crush on Cinder, or on Ember, and he keeps trying to flirt with her and give her flowers that he grows out of his armpits, which is gross, and they keep burning up every time she touches them. So we have the sequence where she's like going all over the Firetown, making all of these different deliveries and everything like that, and all of that stuff to like some of their other customers and all of that. So we have that sequence go through, and it's supposed to be that the next day they're going to have this big red dot sale in the store. So her father is working on getting everything ready for the big red dot sale. When she gets back home after she's done her deliveries, Bernie is kind of passed out on the counter, because he kind of is working himself to exhaustion, and it's stated that he's kind of past the age where he should probably have retired. But again, we don't get exact ages on any of the characters as far as I'm aware. I don't, well, in the movie itself, they don't really state any exact ages, and I don't think I saw any ages listed specifically on the Wikipedia or on the Disney Wiki for the characters. So I could be wrong there, but I'm not sure. If there are ages listed, I don't know what they are, or I couldn't find them. But Wade and Ember seem to be about in their mid-20s, mid to early 20s. Bernie and Ember might be in their 60s, give or take, and such. So, Bernie ends up giving Ember the responsibility of being the one in charge of the big red dot sale. So, she sends him off to bed, and she finishes getting everything ready. And, she's really excited about this because she wants to prove herself. And she, the next day, all of the customers start coming in, and they just cause so many problems. It's like, don't take from the bottom of the stack. Take from the top of the stack so it doesn't fall over. Yes, that stuff is breakable. Please don't just drop it into your cart. No, you can't eat that until you pay for it. Just, so many different issues that she's having with the different customers. And I have dealt with this a million times when it comes to dealing with customers in retail. Trust me, anyone that's worked in retail has had these issues. Particularly when it comes to a sale, like, well, what does the sale imply? Read the sign type of things. So we have all of that, and Ember kind of ends up getting to the point where she's about ready to explode. So she runs down to the basement, and she kind of ends up, letting off her steam there. And in the process, it ends up causing like a mini earthquake in the bottom of the store. And out of this, and there are pipes in the basement that shouldn't have water in them because supposedly the water to Firetown had been shut off a long time ago, which is at least some concession, I guess, that the city made, because it's just like, well, there's no point in sending water here because it's Firetown. They don't need water necessarily. So what happens is one of the pipes ends up bursting and it starts flooding the basement, and Ember uses her fire to melt the pipe shut, which it's stated that Bernie had rebuilt the entire building kind of by himself. Probably Cinder helped a little bit here and there, but mostly Bernie. So I like how the fire elementals are able to use their fire to, shape the glass and melt, the metal to, close up pipes and everything like that. And out of the water comes this water elemental whose name is Wade, and he pops out of the water, and he's like holding this picture of Ember and Cinder and Bernie on like Ember's birthday, and he just starts bawling his eyes out. Kind of Izuku Midoriya style for any My Hero fans that are watching this. Kind of Izuku style, bawling his eyes out at the drop of a hat. And he ends up he ends up actually like running around the basement and starts writing up the fact that like, oh, this stuff is not up to code because he's actually a city inspector. And while this is going on, Ember is trying to get the citations away from him, and is like freaking out, and she's like, you can't do that, and getting they have this conversation that is more of kind of like this very antagonistic interaction. And then Wade ends up skittering out of the building, and Ember ends up chasing after him, and we have this chase sequence through the city where he ends up running up and getting onto the kind of the monorail train that they have there, and Ember runs up after him, and it's kind of the first time that she's left Firetown in a long time, and she gets on the train, and she has to walk through the train. And part of the sequence is very similar to what we see happen in the trailer that they had for the series, which I really liked. A trailer for the movie. So it's Cinder or Ember on the train, making her way through the train, trying to find Wade, and eventually she ends up she does end up finding him after she's had to deal with a few other elementals that she has to get past. She ends up getting to Wade, and then he gets off the train, and they end up running again. And there's more of this chase sequence throughout the form of the city, which gives us a chance to see some of the city and see how the city is designed. Ember also has this umbrella with her that she keeps using to like block water and stuff like that from hitting her, so she doesn't get extinguished. One of the things that we see happen when any time a fire elemental gets hit by water is they need to eat something. Generally wood is what they tend to eat that really quick, so that way they can replenish their fire and they're back to normal. So we see that a couple of times throughout the movie. But as they're running through the city, they end up finally at City Hall, and Ember actually ends up making this giant wave of fire in front of the building to try to stop Wade from getting inside. And he just like looks at her, and then there's like this little pipe thing that goes underneath, little water drainage thing that he just like glumps through and glumps up on the other side, and she's just like, God damn it. And Wade's like, I'm really sorry, but this is gonna embarrass you. Whoop! Goes right past her, and he heads inside to hand in the citations. And as this happens, after he sends in the citations, he ends up hearing Ember outside, and she's explaining that like, this is my dad's dream. He built the store himself. It was his dream, and if I can't have that be that it's my fault that it gets ruined. And everything like that. And Wade, bleeding heart that he is, it's the character we need for the movie, and I've met people that are like this, bleeding heart that he is, decides it's like, hey, I can't call the citations back, but we can go down to the citation filing office and you can plead your case. And she's like, okay. And he takes her down there, and they have to make their way through this big, very overgrown, wooded, plants all over this area. And they meet Fern, which I find hilarious because my mom's boss's name is Vern with a V, which I just find hilarious. But they meet Fern, and he is, kind of this, center for, sending all of the different files around like that. And he is an earth elemental. And Ember tries to explain to him, it's like, this is why you can't do this and everything like that. Please don't do this. Please don't shut us down and everything like that. And Fern, via this whole argument, it's kind of funny because Wade is kind of trying to explain to Fern what's going on, and Cinder keeps trying to stop Wade because she finds it embarrassing as to what's going on, because she hadn't meant to tell Wade that information anyway about it being her father's dream and everything like that. But now he's the one telling it to Fern, and Cinder ends up blowing up and burning off a bunch of the different plant material from Fern. And he just seems kind of like resigned to it, which is kind of funny. And he explains that, yeah, the files already went through, the citations went through, I'm sorry. And, he gives her this pamphlet about, so you're being shut down and everything. He's just like, expect to be shut down within the week. Wade tries to apologize to Ember, and I think he says something about like, well, you can talk to my supervisor, but she's not here right now. So then Ember goes home, and she finds out that they had to stop the big red dot sale because the basement flooded, and her parents have been trying to fix that. And then we have this little flashback sequence where we get a little bit more of this information as to why her parents left Fireland in the first place. It is explained that the reason they left Firetown, because they had been building up a home there and everything like that, because that's where they were from. That's where her parents grew up. They'd been building up a home there, but then this huge natural disaster came through and kind of took everything away from them. So they then left Firetown. And in this part of the flashback, we get another part of the flashback later, but in this flashback we see, Bernie's parents and the rest of the, Fireland to a degree, their family kind of showing that, telling, sending them off and everything like that, and Bernie and Cinder getting into the boat and leaving. It's also stated that he never saw his family again. It's somewhat stated that Cinder at least got to see her mother again, but I don't exactly know how that works into everything. So, we get kind of this little bit of a backstory there. And a lot of cases, that is a lot of reasons why, people, immigrants leave their home countries, is because, natural disasters happen, war happens. There's no jobs. They need to find a new place. They need to give their children a better chance. Lots of reasons why immigrants leave. Different things like that. The whole, for America, it was, the streets were paved with gold and there's jobs everywhere and everything like that. Were, so much of the, drawing factor for bringing immigrants over to the U.S. That enticement factor and everything like that. And Elemental City kind of probably had similar answers to that as well. So we kind of have those sequences and everything like that. And Ember has not told her parents that she's the one that caused the explosion in the basement and caused the flooding. But as Bernie keeps saying, there shouldn't be any water in Firetown. None of this should be happening. There shouldn't be any water coming through. So Ember, of course, feels very guilty about this. So the next day, she goes back to City Hall, and she ends up encountering Wade again. And she's like, well, I'm here to talk to your supervisor. And he's like, well, she's not here right now. She's actually off at the airball game at Cyclone Stadium. And she's like, okay, well, when will she be back? So Wade decides to actually take Ember with him to the airball game, which, again, Cinder is kind of, or Ember, I don't know why I keep mixing up Cinder and Ember. I'm sorry. I mean Ember. Ember and Wade go to Cyclone Stadium, and she's going there because she wants to try to plead her case to Gail Cumulus, who is the Wade's supervisor. I have a cousin named Gail. And also Gale, there might be a Frozen 2 reference in that with the wind spirit being named Gale. Might be a reference there. And what ends up happening is, of course, they make their way into the game, and Ember is just very taken aback by this big situation here because she's never been to an airball game. She doesn't quite see the big deal behind it and everything. And they make their way to where Gale is in the stands, and Ember kind of tries to plead her case to Gale, and it ends up resulting in somewhat of a shouting match between the two of them, with Ember going very much purple and with Gale getting very electricity and lightningy and everything like that, because it's these two very opposing, similar stubborn personalities kind of meeting and everything. So we're having that moment there. And it's kind of revealed that like one of the players on the team is just not having a very good time right now for the home team, and Wade ends up kind of eventually getting like the whole crowd cheering, we love you Lutz and everything like that for the player and everything, which makes gets the player more motivated and does result in a win for the game, and all of that. So we have all of that moment, and Ember is very intrigued by the fact that Wade is able to make these connections with people even though he doesn't know them. So we kind of have that moment there. And eventually when they leave the game, Gale has kind of Gale and Cinder or Ember have gotten off on a better foot at this point in time, and they end up making a Gale makes a deal with Ember and Wade that if because Wade explains that he had been looking for how he ended up in the pipes in the first place was that while he was on his job being a city inspector, he had found water in parts of Firetown that weren't supposed to be there, because there's not supposed to be water in Firetown. There's water in the canals, and these certain canals that lead to Firetown are not supposed to have water in them. So he ended up getting washed down into a drain and then sucked through the pipes and then shot out into the basement of Ember's father's store, and that's how he got there. So they need to figure out where the leak is coming from, and Gale makes the deal with Gale explains, well, there shouldn't be water in Firetown, we shut that off years ago. So Ember and Gale and Wade kind of make this deal that if Ember and Wade can figure out where the leak is coming from by the end of the week and get it fixed, that Gale will forget about the citations and not worry about it, and just, the fireplace won't be shut down. So Gale makes that deal with them, which Ember is really happy about that. And then they Ember and Wade rush off to go and try to start finding the leak. During this time frame, they end up there's more water damage. Unfortunately, that was done to the store because the pressure in the pipes still have water in them, so it keeps leaking and everything like that. And Bernie and Cinder have to keep trying to fight it and everything like that to make sure that the customers don't get damaged, and to make sure that their wares in the store don't get damaged and that they don't get shut down. So what ends up happening is Ember and Wade go up to the roof, where Ember ends up basically using her fire and some of this discarded material to make a hot air balloon that they then ride in as they look over the different canals that lead through Firetown, and they start following it, which just results in this gorgeous sequence that I love. Because it's also a way of like showing off the beauty of Elemental City at night, and also having this moment between Wade and Ember. They have this moment between Wade and Ember while they're up in the hot air balloon that is kind of similar to the moment between Nick and Judy when they are in Zootopia, when they are in like the sky cab in the trees after they had the encounter with the police and the leopard and everything like that. So it's this moment where the two of them connect, and Wade ends up explaining that like he wished he had been able to have a much better relationship with his father, that the two of them got along like oil and water, where they just never were able to fix any of their problems, and and all of that. And he loves seeing this, the little bit of the relationship for how much Ember cares about her father and wants to try to help him and wants to try to help the store and everything like that. So we're kind of having that connection moment there. And Ember ends up telling him the story about one of the about when she was a kid, about one of the things that her father tried to do is that when she was a kid, there was this like Grand Central Station garden place, and they had this Vivisaria there, which is supposed to be this beautiful type of flower that is supposed to be able to grow in any element, including fire. And so this was happening when Ember was a little girl, and Bernie takes her to the station, to the garden, so she can see the flower. And unfortunately, they get told, no fire allowed, and they end up getting kicked out. And, I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, the reason behind that is because they're fire, and if you let fire in with the plants, then it's going to, burn the plants or whatever if they're not careful. I was like, yeah, but that's not a reason to not have them be able to go in there and see the plants. She's a little girl that wants to go and see the pretty flower. Y'all are being jerks. It's explained that that they weren't allowed in because of their fire heritage, but that a few years later the building flooded. So even if it had changed, now Ember really can't go down there and go and see it because it's all flooded and everything. So they're having this conversation for the two of them, and while this is going on, they're watching down from the balloon, the makeshift hot air balloon, and trying to track where the water is coming from. Eventually, they end up making their way to where Wade is able to find the water. Eventually, they're able to make their way to where Wade had found the leak in the first place, and then they track the leak back to where they find this spill-off reservoir that actually the doors have been rusted and pulled apart, and so they fell apart. So that's why the water keeps coming through every time that there's one of the water trains that goes by, and it splashes water into the air, then it rolls down the canal until it hits Firetown, which is why they're having this problem. And so what ends up happening is it basically results in Wade and Ember, after they have this little harrowing sequence of trying to survive the water flow when it comes through, they end up using a bunch of these sandbags that they found right there to block up the spillage pipe. Or not the spillage pipe, but to block up the, entrance or the hole in the door. And then Wade's like, well, I can get a crew down here by Friday and they can fix all of this and we'll be good. And from there, we kind of have this bit of a transition because Wade actually really likes spending time with Ember, so he's like, hey, how about tomorrow at 3 o'clock you meet me at the Movieplex and we can go see a movie? And, so we have this, moment where, we have this little, sequence that's, the Steal the Show is the song that's playing in the background. That's kind of the song that was written for the movie. And it's this little kind of, it's the cute little romantic sequence in the movie where they have Wade and Ember going out and doing fun stuff, going to the movie, getting their pictures taken in a photo booth, going out and eating, having this little dancing for fun and everything like that, and all this other fun stuff. And the song is adorable. I love the song, and the sequence is adorable. And one of the things that happens is and this is part of the scene that we see in the trailer, one of the scenes that we see in the trailer where they end up walking by this big lake in the middle of Elemental City that has all these different mineral stones all around it. I think it's just called Mineral Lake. And as they're walking around it, Ember's fire changes depending on which one she's standing on, which is something that fire does. If you burn different chemicals or elements in fire, you can get different colors out of them. I've seen this done. It can be very beautiful depending on, which colors you're throwing in there and everything like that. It doesn't last for an exceedingly long amount of time, but it is a fun thing to do. And, there's a sequence from the trailer and in this moment where she's running across all the different colored minerals and having all these different colors, purple, blue, red, yellow, green, all these other colors flash through her and everything, which just makes Wade just in awe of her. And then Wade ends up sliding across the lake to make this rainbow appear. So there's this, this moment where they're kind of showing off what they can do and everything like that, this beauty that they can make. So we have that nice moment there, and such for how they end the show. And she is hiding the relationship that she has with Wade from her parents, which her mother actually kind of starts to note that Ember smells a little bit different. And she starts to smell whiffs of love on Ember, which, makes, Cinder very happy, but also very curious. A couple of days later or so, Wade ends up having to make his way to the fireplace disguised as a bunch of vases that have water in them. And flowers for Ember, and that's how he sneaks into the building and everything like that. He explains it like, okay, so the bags didn't work. We need to try something else. The bags got blown away, and the city crew that I had brought in to try to fix this, they actually don't like me because I've caused problems for them in the past. So this is where we end up having the moment where Bernie actually finds them talking, and Wade tries to hide the fact that he's a city inspector. That doesn't go well. And Bernie is just like, fine, if you're an inspector, come and inspect our food. So this is, again, one of the scenes from the trailer where we see Wade eating the hot, the coal nuts, and eating those. And, the scene where he eats it and then like the big water bubble of the scream comes out of him and goes off, and then Ember's like, see, he likes it. And, Wade's like, yeah, that was great. And then Bernie just gives him even hotter ones to eat, which Wade eats, and that doesn't go well. And then Wade does this thing where he actually like, hey, after that's died down a little bit, it tastes pretty good. And in this case, it's not Wade trying to be disrespectful or anything like that. He takes a mug and he scoops some of the coals into it, and he puts a little bit of water into it, and then that's how he's able to drink it. And he really, really likes it, which makes Bernie exceedingly angry about this. Because much earlier in the movie, in the beginning, when we were having the sequence of Ember growing up, there's these two little snot-nosed teenagers that come into the store and just start, watering down a bunch of the different products and everything like that. To be disrespectful, which, again, I've worked in retail. There are idiot teenagers that come into the store and just go around and pick stuff up and drop it on the floor just to do stuff because, they know they won't be punished for it or whatever. And it's just them being jerks. In some shape or fashion. Boys and girls will do this. Also, parents, if you have kids and you bring them into a store with you, please keep them with you. Because we are not a babysitter. It's not our job to watch your kids while you're shopping. That does not mean go and let them play in the toy aisle. No, you're supposed to keep your eye on your kid. Don't make us do that. Just reference points for that for people that go shopping, which is everybody. Be nice to the people working in the customer service industry. Because if it wasn't for them, you'd have a much harder time getting all of the stuff you need. So just side note there. Wade and Ember, Bernie gets very, very angry about this and ends up chasing Wade out of the store after he takes a picture of him and puts him on the band board, or panned board as he keeps calling it, which is funny. And Ember kind of, pretends to chase him out as well. And then she's like, okay, well, we have to go and figure something out. So they go down to the beach and they end up trying to make more sandbags. And that doesn't result in something that's going to be very helpful. It's a stopgap measure that's not going to work very good because the sandbags will just get washed away again. So what Wade and Ember end up doing is they end up sitting on the sand for a little bit, and Ember at one point kind of like deflates a little bit, which is just kind of funny when her flame kind of goes down a little bit. And her and Wade end up having this conversation, and he notices that she melted the sand into glass. And we see her like pick up a glob of the glass, melt it, turn it into a ball, and then like make a glass viviseria in it, which is gorgeous. um, that's what I was gonna do. I was gonna bring up some of the different glass pieces that I had. Just like the little glass orbs that I have in a bookcase. I was gonna bring those up. Oh well, too late now. And so that's how Ember figures up what she's going to do. During this whole conversation, or during some of these other little bits of the conversation, it ends up other bits of conversation that Wade and Ember end up having, we start to get these hints that Ember may not be doing exactly what she wants. She's doing what she thinks is expected of her. And she ends up making the comment that, like, I just get angry so easily. And Wade makes the comment of, like, well, I kind of take it that when I'm angry, it's my anger trying to tell me something that I don't want to hear. And Ember is having a little bit of a problem with that, because it's like she wants to try to make her father happy, but she's not sure if that's exactly what she wants to do with her life, as opposed to like putting everything into making her father happy. It's like, well, what do I want to do that will make me happy, is kind of one of those questions. Doing what I want as opposed to what is expected of me based of everything else that's happened. She's been told all her life that when she's ready, she'll take over the fireplace, and she wants to make her father happy and proud and everything like that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's entirely what she wants to do with her life, which is something that most kids, regardless of whether or not your parents are immigrants or have lived in the country for a very long time or several generations, there's always that whole question of, do I want to do this whole life that my parents have planned out for me, or do I want to do something different that makes me happy and is my passion for stuff, is one of those questions that kind of comes up with this movie. It's like, where does that road lead me? And different things like that. What can I be successful with and still have a good life? And, will my parents still support me? It's like where a lot of those questions come from, which is something that a lot of kids have dealt with over the years, or that children have dealt with for generations, and such. And what ends up happening is Wade and Ember Ember figures out that she can melt the sand that they have built up around the opening, melt it into glass, and then form it into glass to keep it from letting all the water through. So they go back there, and she spends that time, she melts all of the sand, builds it up into this big tempered glass splash thing that is enough to stop the water, as a stopgap measure for a certain amount of time. And so we have that going on. And the next day, or that night, Ember goes back to her. Wait, is this when this happens, or is this after a different sequence? I don't remember exactly. No, this is later. So, Wade says that he'll let Gale know, and hopefully they can have averted disaster with what's going on. So what ends up happening is, Ember is very happy about this. She's just very, very excited about what's going on. And she ends up going to Wade's house the next night, or on the night that everything is happening. Or a couple of nights later, after he's supposed to have gotten an answer back from Gale about how satisfied she is with the solution they came up with. And she ends up going to Wade's mom's Brooks apartment building, or condo, whatever it is, where they live. And her mother actually ended up following her because she can actually smell love on Ember now. So her mother followed her to the building. And so Ember and Wade go into the building, and we meet Wade's mom, Brooke, and we meet his family. He has like a sister named Adam, and his wife's name is Eddie, and there's an uncle there, and there's Wade's other sibling, and I think its girlfriend name is Ghibli, which is a reference to Studio Ghibli, which I love. Um, and actually, I think in this sequence is where we have like the cameo of like the thing that'll be in the next Disney movie, because the next Disney movie I think that's supposed to be coming out that's Pixar, um, is Elio, I think is the name of the movie. And at some point in the movie, there's like a poster in the background of something, but there's also the watercolor painting that we see in this sequence that was done by the uncle. Actually, kind of has all of the different it has the emotions in it from Inside Out, but it has additional emotions in it, I think, that are supposed to be in Inside Out 2. So there's another connection there, to Inside Out 2, which I love. Which Inside Out 2 already looks like, oh, anxiety, yes, that is a perfect thing to deal with right now. Perfect. Side note for Inside Out 2. But what ends up happening is, of course, Wade and Ember introduces Wade to his family and everything, and like their apartment has like water all over the floor. So Ember ends up actually Wade makes this has this like, little makeshift chair thing for Ember to stand on / sit on for her to be in the apartment and everything. And we see his nephews, Marco, Polo, Joke there, of course. And they end up just having this very nice dinner together as a family. Where she gets to meet Wade's family and all of that stuff. And they're all very nice to her. There's little bits of like, the uncle says something that's like, you speak very eloquently, and Ember kind of like sasses back to him a little bit. And I think he apologizes for that. And there's like some other stuff that happens. And there's a moment where one of the like the water vase on the table gets broken, and Ember grabs up all the pieces and she starts melting it back together and fixing it, blowing it into a new thing, adding in some other stuff, and does this this great little sequence where we see her forming this whole beautiful new glass vase out of all of the broken glass. And Wade's family are just very amazed by this, including his mother, who is just like, she just loves the fact that this worked out so great, that it made Ember made this beautiful vase. Brooke has also stated that all Wade has done since meeting Ember is talk about Ember, which is funny. Which again kind of shows these differences in the way that family dynamics works with, for Ember, it's like she adores her father and her mother and she wants to make them happy, but she's not telling them that she's the reason that the basement leak happened and that this other stuff is happening, and she didn't tell them that there's the chance that they could be shut down, whereas Wade seems to tell his family everything. We also see it that they all tend to cry at a drop of the hat, just like Wade does, which is like, okay, is this a Wade feature, a Ripple family feature, or is it just a water feature in general, where just like any person who's a water elemental can cry at the drop of a hat? Is that what this is about, or is it just this family? But so there's those moments there. But they end up playing after. They tell this funny story about Wade when he was a kid, that he got sucked into a sponge, which is just funny, and that's one of the sequences in the trailer. And then after dinner, they play the crying game, which is where they're supposed to try to make each other not cry. Sure. And the uncle makes the mom cry really easily, and then it's Wade and Ember's turn, and Wade tries to make Ember cry, and it just doesn't work. And then he ends up going off where he actually starts telling her about his own feelings for her, which results in Ember having this little bit of like this slight daydream sequence where she sees the two of them together, and then like they can't, they're not quite able to touch because she's worried about he could extinguish her, or she could evaporate him. And that does result in Ember crying. And she's like, before the game, she's very confident, like, I have never cried. Fire doesn't cry. And she cries. And all of that. And then they get the call from Gale, and Gale is like, she's very satisfied with what they were able to do with the glass and everything. So she tells them that's fine, and they don't have to worry about the tickets and everything like that. So that makes Ember very happy. And then before they leave, Brooke tells Ember that she has a friend who Ember could do an internship with at this glass blowing company, to work on her skills and everything like that, and that she could be an amazing artist if that would be okay with her. And, Ember very polite about it. They leave, and Ember is like, your mom just offered me a job. And he's like, yeah, I know. That's just, wow. She's like very amazed by that. And while all of this was going on, Cinder, her mother, had followed them to the building and had tried to get inside, and the doorman would not let the mom inside, would not let Cinder inside, and keeps blocking her and everything. And so it's like this whole time that Ember was upstairs having this nice dinner and playing the game with Wade's family, her mother has been downstairs. Her mother has been downstairs trying to get inside and just like dashing back and forth in front of the water elemental guy who's the doorman, which is just hilarious. And she's just kind of like run out of energy. They both kind of ran out of energy, and she's like, bye, and she like leaves. And then Wade and Ember end up having this moment where they kind of have this bit of an argument or weird form of a conversation. And she finally realizes that Ember finally realizes that her temper has been telling her that she doesn't actually want to run the fireplace, that she wants to do something else, that she does kind of want to go and do this internship thing that Wade's mom talked about, but she doesn't know how to be able to tell her father that. So they end up driving back or riding back on Ember's motorcycle back to the fireplace, and Cinder actually saw them, so she ends up catching up with them. And she ends up bringing them inside. So during this whole sequence, Cinder does not ask for Wade's name, I don't think, at all. She just keeps calling him Water Guy. And she's like, fine, I'm going to do this reading. And she brings them inside to the little reading area where she does her love match readings. And she's like, okay, light the incense or whatever. And Ember is able to light hers easily. And Wade can't really light his because he's water. So the mom's like, see, water and fire can't mix. Wade proves her wrong. He gets up and he uses his control over his water to be able to focus in Ember's, the light from her fire, focus that into a little, like the laser beam like you do when you have like a magnifying glass and you try burning ants. I don't think I ever really tried doing that. But where you can focus in the light and lights the other incense on fire. So he did light it, and we see the smoke gently curling around, and Cinder is very much amazed by this. And unfortunately, during this time frame, Bernie shows up, so they have to rush Wade out of the building. And there ends up being this other conversation where first there's this very awkward moment where Cinder and Ember are trying to hide the fact that Wade was there at all, and that Cinder and that Wade or that the two of them haven't really been home for several hours and such, and Bernie's been on his own. But what ends up happening is Bernie ends up telling Cinder what had happened, the other thing that had happened when they left Fireland, or when they were leaving Fireland, that when they were leaving, before they got on the boat, Bernie had done this very big show of respect to his father, where he does this big bow, which is where you do this big bow to show your respect for your parent or show respect for your family. And Bernie did this to his father before him and Cinder left, but his father did not do the big bow back to him, which is kind of like the sequence of like his father telling him just like, I don't respect these choices you're making. I don't agree with you, and you do not have my support in this endeavor, type of a thing. And Bernie wants to try to show that he does have this type of support for Ember. And again, he still is under the impression that she just wants to run the shop the same way that he did and everything like that. And what ends up happening is he ends up revealing that he had this sign made that is Ember's fireplace, and that his intention is that once they get the shop fixed back up after they, take care of all the water leakage, that he will retire and hand the shop over to Cinder, and they will have a grand reopening as it being Cinder's fireplace. So we have that moment. And during that time frame, like that night, Ember just she's crying and she cannot figure out how to make up her mind about this. She's like, do I want this? Do I want that? Do I want this? Do I want that? Do I want to do what makes my parents happy and makes my father happy and it's this thing that they've thought that I would want for the whole of my life? Or do I want to go and do this thing that makes me happy and take this chance with the internship and try being with Wade and all this other stuff? It's like, which one do I want to choose? And Ember kind of makes up her mind, and the next day she goes to see Wade and she gives him the glass Vivisaria. And she, as a gift, and she's kind of like, don't tell your mom thank you, but no, I don't want the internship. So she's kind of made the decision that she is just going to, take over the fireplace and run it, like her father did and everything like that, so he can retire and everything. Wade ends up actually taking her to the flooded Garden Central station where they find Gale. And what happens is Gale, using her wind power, sucks in a huge amount of air and blows into the part where it is all flooded underneath and makes this giant air bubble. And Wade explains to Ember that he is going to take her through with the air bubble that should last about 20 minutes, take her down into the depths of the garden and take her down to the Vivisaria so she can see the Vivisaria. And Ember is slightly hesitant about this at first, but agrees. And, they get her into the bubble and everything like that, and Wade gets in on the outside because he can, steer the bubble on the outside because he'll be safe in the water. And he can breathe in the water, and Ember needs air, of course, to A, not be extinguished, B, so she can breathe, as they start going through it all. And we get this great sequence as they're traveling through the different, what would have been hallways and stairwells and stuff like that, down through the flooded Garden Central station. And they, previously before this, there's the other scene from the trailer where they have to get past the fence, where, the way Wade gets over the fence is he just throws a shirt over the fence and walks through the fence. And then Ember just walks through the fence. And they're like, why do they even have these? And she's like, I don't know. And that sequence is just funny. But then we have the whole sequence where they're going under the water and everything like that. And they make their way to where the Vivisaria are. And Ember finally gets to see one. And she thinks it's so beautiful. And then we see as Wade kind of carries her around this area inside of the water orb, that inside of the air bubble, that her glowing, because she's so happy, she's giving off this beautiful radiant light that is being reflected and refracted from the water bubble. And that is waking up all of the different Vivisaria that have just continued to grow more and more underwater for the past however many years since it flooded. And so we have the sequence where Wade is spinning her around all the different Vivisaria, and she's just watching all of it and everything. And she's just loving it and all of that. And Wade is just it's the moment where it's just why can't a guy ever look at me like that? Because whenever he is, you're looking away, type of a thing. And Wade is just loving seeing Ember like this and seeing her so happy and everything. And then unfortunately, there ends up being a the air bubble starts shrinking at a much faster rate. So Wade is rushing as fast as he can to get out of the exit and up and out and get Ember out of all the water, so that way even if the the bubble pops, she's not going to drown and be extinguished and everything like that. So they get out of there right as the bubble pops and everything like that, and they end up underneath this bridge on Mineral Lake or Elemental Lake, whatever it's called. And there ends up being this, Wade tries to apologize, and Ember's just don't apologize, that was amazing, that was so fun, I finally got to see a Vivisaria, and she's so happy. And eventually this moment ends up leading into the moment where it's just like, we need to find out if we can work as a couple. And she's worried that she could burn him away or that he could extinguish her and everything like that, which are valid reasons. But there ends up being that, they end up finally having the moment where they touch, and it's, Wade and Ember touch their hands together for the first time, and she's not extinguished, he's not boiled away. It makes steam, and we have this great other little sequence where they finally end up holding hands, and there's the moment where their hands kind of press together, which I'm just like, I'm sitting there going, Tarzan reference, Tarzan reference, Tarzan reference, because I'm a dork, and I'm a Disney dork. And so they have that whole little moment there, and they kind of end up like dancing underneath the bridge and everything like that. I don't remember if they kiss here or not. I don't think so, but they end up dancing for a little bit, and then he says, "I'm so lucky to have you," and then that makes her remember when her father said, "I'm so lucky to have you," which kind of makes Ember pause, and then she pushes away from Wade and kind of breaks up with him, and she runs off, and they do have this like shouting match to a degree where she's kind of going purple and everything like that while they're having this moment, and from her anger, and why can't we be together, why is that so hard and everything like that. Wade is trying to do it from like the logical perspective, like, but we like each other, and we were able to touch and it didn't cause a problem and everything like that. And Ember is just not opening up for her true feelings and everything. And there is a moment, and it's a valid moment in the movie, where Ember's like, I don't have the luxury of the rich kid fool around and find out what happens luxury that you have. You and your family have that ability. We don't. My parents have sacrificed everything in order to try to give me this chance. And I can't turn my back on them. I can't turn my back on my dad and what he's built and everything like that, just because maybe I do want to go and do this internship, and maybe I do want to be with you, but I can't turn my back on him to do that because I want to make him proud and everything like that. Which is, again, it's this whole concept that, immigrant children deal with this all the time, and even just kids in general and teenagers and young adults deal with this all the time, where it's just like, do I want to do what I want to do and pursue this thing that is my passion, whether that be cooking, baking, art, writing, animation, videos, video games, all that type of stuff, that is stuff that, a lot of people are like, that's not a valid job. Go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, go be a this, go be a that, go be something that can, get you a lot of money and everything like that. But that's not something that you have a passion for. And, there's this, that moment is brought up several times throughout the course of this movie of, do I live to make my parents proud of me, even if it means that I'm not doing what I want? Or do the parents in some cases have to bend in order to allow them to see that their children are happy, regardless of whether or not that means the kid goes down a different path than what the parents had initially planned for them? Which is part of what this movie is about. And there's actually a behind the scenes thing on Disney Plus for this movie where they talked to a bunch of the different people that worked on this movie and worked at Pixar, who are immigrants or are children of immigrants who came to the U.S. very recently, or within the last several decades, and how their families made those big choices and everything like that, and how in some cases their families weren't sure if the animation route was the right way of doing it, if going into art was the right way of doing it, that wanted their kids to do something else, but their kids went and did this. Different ones that ended up marrying someone from outside their culture, which had some problems with their families, but it ended up being okay in the end, and all that type of stuff. So those moments are supposed to be reflected in this movie, where like that argument needs to be made, but that doesn't mean that Wade wanting to be with Ember is any less just because he's coming from this rich family and wants to be with this immigrant girl. And that doesn't mean that Ember, can't use this connection that she found in order to, help make things better for her, give her a happy life type of a thing. And, that's kind of this whole sequence here that's going on here, these moments that are happening. So Ember ends up, going back home, and she's, just very sad and everything like that. And we get to the next night or so where Bernie is getting ready to, hand over kind of the keys to the shop to Ember and have their grand reopening and everything like that. And, so they're having this nice sequence, and so much of Firetown has shown up for the moment and all of that. And Wade shows up and interrupts and everything like this, and ends up telling Ember that he loves her, and he accidentally ends up revealing that she's the one that did the damage to the basement at the pipes. And it causes this whole shouting match sequence and everything like that between Ember and Wade and Bernie and Cinder saying that Ember and Wade are actually a perfect match because she did the reading and they actually matched perfectly, and all of this stuff. And like there's this whole sequence that's happening here that is like, the moment where it's just like all the stuff comes full circle. Well, it's just like, you have to reveal this. Ember's trying to apologize for what happened, but Bernie's not listening, and he's angry about the fact that this is Wade, and that's his water, that fire and water are not supposed to be together because they can't mix, because they're not good for each other, type of a thing. And all of the sequence happens, and it's done perfectly by the actors that do a great job at how they do the animation and everything. And so there's this whole moment, and then eventually, Wade actually brought back the Viviseria thing and left it in front of Ember, and then he left. And she's rejected Wade again and everything like that, regardless of what her mother's love fortune said. And Ember ends up, the truth is revealed. She damaged the pipes and everything like that. So Bernie's like, he revokes his offer to have her become the new head of the, the one in charge of the fireplace and everything like that. He's like, I'm not retiring and everything. And while all of this is happening, unbeknownst to them, the glass that is holding back all of the water is starting to crack, and the structure is starting to weaken on the dam. So Ember actually ends up driving away and having the Viviseria, and she ends up trying to like throw it into like the lake or whatever, but she can't bring herself to do it. And while she's off in the distance, she sees where she knows the dam is, and that she sees that it's actually falling apart. And so she starts racing back as fast as she can back to Firetown, and shouting out warnings as she gets there. And while this is going on, Wade is at the train station with his family, ready to leave, and they're all bawling and sad and everything like that, and everything. They're go travel the world, it'll be fine, and everything like that, which is again kind of this whole rich person, they have the ability to go and do that. Well, not everybody else has the ability to do that, type of a thing. And Wade ends up seeing the same thing, where he sees that, oh no, there's like all this smoke coming from Firetown, so he's running, he starts running his way there. And Ember makes her way down to Firetown, where she's, yelling at everybody as she's riding past to go inside and get safe and everything like that, as all this water is rushing past her, or rushing behind her. And, she's yelling at her parents to get out of the way, and she's, the fire, the blue flame is still trapped inside, or is still inside of the fireplace, so she needs to get inside of there to get it and to protect it. So she's, she gets through like the skylight in the door, and she's trying to hold back the water, and Wade ends up getting his way there and, getting inside with her to try to help her. And he's like, I couldn't just let you die, or couldn't have to do all that. And she ends up gathering up a bunch of glass to try to like melt around the blue flame to keep it from getting hit by the water. But that's not working, so, and the water and the glass ends up cracking, and Wade and Ember end up getting shoved into kind of the like the back room little area that is part of the chimney area. And they end up getting shoved in there, and they get trapped in there. Thankfully, Wade had managed to grab the little lantern and scoop up some of the blue fire, so the blue flame is okay. But now Wade and Ember are trapped inside of this, enclosed room. The water is still leaking in, so Ember has to like melt a bunch of the metal to keep the water from leaking in. But that means that now Wade is trapped inside of this enclosed space with fire, with Ember, with heat. and he slowly starts to kind of like steam and evaporate. They try to climb up the chimney to get out, but that ends up, kind of collapsing, and they get trapped in the area. And Wade ends up telling, and Ember's like, I need to get you out of here. And he's like, but if you open that, then you'll get crushed by all the water. You'll die. And he ends up, it's basically Wade makes the sacrifice play where he's just like, she does declare that she loves him. And Wade, they hug each other. And while this is happening, Wade evaporates in all of this. And after the flood has died down, Bernie and Ember, along with a bunch of the other residents of Firetown, have made their way inside and are trying to dig out Wade and Ember. And Bernie and Cinder and the residents are trying to dig out Wade and Ember, trying to dig them out. And they find them. And Ember is sitting there, and she's holding the flame, and she says, Wade's gone. He sacrificed himself. And she goes and she like apologizes to her father and shows him that the fire is okay and everything. And she says the fireplace is his dream, not hers, and everything. And Bernie, assures her that I think he says something along the lines of like, you're far more important to me than this shop or this flame. That it is about what her dream is, what she wants for her dream, and that's what he will support. That's why for all of the whole movie he was so much wanting to have her be the one in charge of the fireplace later on, because it was what he thought was her dream, because she'd seemed so invested in it her whole life, with wanting to be happy and wanting to be a part of the fireplace and help him and everything like that, and how she was so good at it. And eventually, and that's what he thought she wanted. But it's this moment where it's like this lack of communication where like Ember didn't quite tell her dad that wasn't exactly what she wanted, and he kept assuming, and they butted heads, and then now they're finally able to see eye to eye. And then everybody starts hearing Wade crying, and Ember runs back, and she looks, and she sees that there's water dripping. And so she figures out that, okay, I need to make him cry. So Ember starts figuring out ways to make Wade cry. She's a sad story, blah, 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 stuff to make him cry. And the water keeps condensing more and more and more and dropping into this giant pot on the ground. Cinder is like, you are a perfect match and everything like that and everything. And like, Bernie is trying to figure out what's going on. And she's like, just say something to make him cry. And he's like, you're no longer banned. Yeah, you're no longer banned from the fireplace and everything. So like all the drips just eventually end up, fully coming together, and they form back into Wade, and he pops out of the thing. And then Wade and Ember embrace, and they're just so happy, and they do kiss and everything like that. And it just makes this gorgeous, they're able to kiss, and they're not burning or extinguishing or anything like that. They are in harmony. And so that happens. And then we cut to several months later. Firetown has been rebuilt, and it's better than ever. And it's much more open to the residents of Elemental City coming in. So there's fire and water and air and the earth elements all mixing together within this area and everything like that. Different shops of all these different places there. Bertie has retired, and two of their neighbors that we saw in there a lot are now the ones that are in charge of the fireplace and everything like that. And Claude, who is the little plant boy, kind of works there, and he's flirting with a fire girl who's his own age, which is funny. Gail is there, looking around the shop and just loves it, and she bumps into Fern and everything like that. She finds out that he's a fan of the Windbreakers. That's the airball tea that they like, and they become kind of romantically involved and everything like that. And Ember arrives, and it's revealed that she has accepted the internship that Wade's mom found for her. And then we go to where we have and that Wade will be joining her as she goes to the internship. And at this point that Cinder and Ember and Wade are saying goodbye to Bernie and Cinder and Brooke at you know, at like the port, so that way Ember and Wade can head off. And, so Wade and his mom are crying, and Bernie's like, "Are you sure he's the one?" And Ember's like, "Yeah, I'm sure," which is just funny. Um, and so we have that moment, and then before Ember gets on the boat to leave, she stops and she does the big bow and everything, and then Bernie does the big bow back to her to show that they are respecting each other's wishes, that he is supporting her and wanting to go and try this and try the glass blowing and art and everything like that, and that she is thankful to him and her mother for everything that they've done for her. So we have that moment happen, and then Ember and Wade head off on the ship. And then during all of the credits, we get these little moments that we see where we see Bernie and Ember and Bernie and Cinder enjoying their relationship. We see Wade and Ember just having a nice time while she's doing her internship. We see Cinder reading Gale and Fern's love fortune. We see Claude dating a little fire girl. We see a water woman dating an earth man and everything like that. We see Bernie and Cinder going to the Ripple household to have dinner with all of them and having a nice time there. We see, them going to the Windbreakers for the airball game and everything like that. Different things along those lines. And then like the last little bit that we see is Ember and Cinder and Bernie get like this vase from Ember, and then her and Wade show up and they accidentally break the vase, and then Ember and Bernie hug and everything like that, and Wade starts crying and all of that. So we get like a nice way of ending out the movie there, which I just love how they did that. There's not a lot of huge cast in the movie. We have Leah Lewis as Ember. We have, and I'm going to butcher the guy's name, and I apologize, Mumudoru Ati as Wade. We have Ronnie Del Carmen as Bernie, who is actually a Pixar worker who has worked on different Pixar movies, and then he eventually ended up becoming a voice actor and then having this role. We have Sheila Omi as Cinder. Again, I apologize for mispronouncing these names. I'm sorry. We have Wendy McLendon Covey as Gale, and then we have Catherine O'Hara as Brooke, which of course Catherine O'Hara is probably the biggest cast name out of this list. She is, of course, she's Sally in Nightmare Before Christmas. She's the mom in Beetlejuice. She's going to be Beetlejuice 2. She's, I think, the mom in the Home Alone movies. She's, just all that stuff. She's good at playing a mom. Let's put it that way. She's good at playing a mom. So I really love this movie. I think they did an amazing job with it. I know a lot of people don't particularly necessarily care for what happened with the movie. It's not as big and bombastic as other Pixar movies are, but they don't all have to be big bombastic movies. In this case, they wanted to tell a love story, and I think they did a pretty damn good job with it. So, and they wanted to tell a love story and a story about family and a story about immigrants, and I think they hit all of those nails on the head perfectly and made it a beautiful story. So that's what I have here. I thank you for watching. As I said, this should be going up the weekend around Thanksgiving, give or take. What's going on with stuff there for other videos, and then that gets me caught up on the Pixar movies. I know there's going to be the next Disney movie coming out soon. That'll be Wish, which whenever I see that, eventually I'll end up doing the review. But that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and go watch Elemental again if you haven't watched it for a while. It's amazing, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and I hope that you had a happy Thanksgiving. So, bye!